Part 1. The Last Transmission. The communications room was filled with smoke and the smell of burning metal. Quillix pressed his thin fingers against the control panel, trying to keep his hands from shaking. Outside, he could hear the screams of his people as the Krathul raiders dragged them from their homes. The peaceful colony on Thessia Prime's moon had never known war. They had never needed weapons. They had always believed the Galactic Council would protect them. That belief was dying along with everything else. "Please," Quillix whispered into the microphone, his voice breaking. "This is Thessia Colony sending distress on all emergency channels. We are under attack by Krathul forces. 300,000 civilians need immediate help. They are taking our children. Please, someone help us." The building shook as another explosion hit nearby. Quillix could see through the cracked window as the massive Krathul warriors, each one standing 3 meters tall and covered in thick armor, moved through the streets like they owned the world. To them, it was already over. The Velnar were weak, small, and completely unprepared for violence. Easy prey. Quillix sent the message again and again. His communications array was damaged, but it was still working. The signal went out into the dark space, traveling faster than light, reaching for anyone who might listen. The Galactic Council station was 12 light-years away. Help should come. It had to come. The door behind him exploded inward. A Krathul warrior stood in the doorway, its 4 eyes glowing red in the darkness. It saw Quillix and laughed. A sound like grinding stones. "Still calling for help, little one?" the raider said in broken Galactic Common. "No one is coming. No one ever comes." Quillix closed his eyes and pressed the transmit button one last time. Then everything went dark. The distress call traveled through space for 3 standard cycles. It passed by 14 different species monitoring stations. Most of them recorded it and forwarded it to the Galactic Council for review. Review meant committees. Committees meant meetings. Meetings meant debates about jurisdiction, proper procedures, and whether intervention was appropriate given the current political situation with the Krathul swarm. The Velnar were dying while bureaucrats argued about paperwork. But on the 3rd cycle, the signal reached the edge of the Terran exclusion zone. The humans called it that because other species were afraid to get too close to Earth's sphere of influence. Humans were Deathworlders, survivors of a planet so hostile that it had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. They were strong, fast, and terrifyingly hard to kill. Their world had taught them to hunt, to fight, and to never give up. Captain Minho was drinking coffee in his command chair aboard the UES Indomitable when the distress call came through. He was a compact man with sharp eyes and the calm expression of someone who had seen combat before. His ship was a patrol vessel, small by fleet standards but heavily armed. Humans didn't build ships that couldn't fight. "Captain, we're receiving an emergency transmission," his communications officer said. "It's old, 3 cycles out. Velnar colony under attack by Krathul raiders." Minho set down his coffee. "Play it." Quillix's desperate voice filled the bridge. The fear in it was clear even through the static. Minho listened to the whole message, then listened to it again. His crew watched him, waiting. They knew that look on his face. "How many Velnar in that colony?" Minho asked. "According to the database, approximately 300,000, sir." "And the Galactic Council response?" The communications officer checked his screen. "They're still in preliminary discussions about forming an assessment committee." Minho felt something cold settle in his chest. An assessment committee. For 300,000 people being enslaved or killed. He stood up and walked to the command console. "Get me Fleet Command, Priority Alpha." "Sir, that's reserved for—" "I know what it's reserved for," Minho said quietly. "Do it." Within minutes, his signal reached Terra Nova Station, the massive human military hub that orbited Saturn. Admiral Yuna received the transmission in her office. She was a tall woman with gray hair and the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile after 30 years of military service. She had fought in the border wars, the pirate conflicts, and the Titan Rebellion. She had seen what happened when good people did nothing. She listened to the distress call. Then she listened to Minho's report. Then she looked at her aide, a young officer named Jiwon, who handled intelligence. "Show me the Galactic Council's response timeline," Yuna said. Jiwon pulled up the data. They received the distress call 72 hours ago. Current status shows they're debating whether to send an observation team. Estimated deployment time if approved is 14 to 21 days. 3 weeks, Yuna said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. 3 weeks while civilians are being loaded onto slave ships. Yes, Admiral. Yuna stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the Third Fleet at anchor. 200 warships, from massive dreadnoughts to fast-attack corvettes. 20,000 crew members. Enough firepower to crack a planet if needed. The Krathul have 70 ships in the Thesia system, Jiwon said, reading her screen. They've conquered 43 worlds in the last decade. No one has successfully resisted them. No one human has tried, Yuna said. She turned back to her desk and opened a secure channel to the fleet commanders. Their faces appeared on her screen, each one showing the same expression. They had heard the distress call too. "Orders, Admiral," Commander Jiho asked. He commanded the Hammer of Sol, the fleet's lead dreadnought. He was younger than Yuna, but had the same hard eyes. Yuna made her decision. Some people would call it rash. Some would say she should wait for council approval. Some would argue that humanity shouldn't interfere in galactic politics. Those people had never heard a child screaming for help. Prep the Third Fleet for immediate deployment. We leave in 6 hours. Destination: Thesia Prime System. Mission: liberation of Velnar civilians and complete elimination of hostile forces. Admiral, the Council. The Council can file a complaint after we're done, Yuna said. The Velnar sent a distress call. We're answering it. That's what militaries are supposed to do. There was a pause. Then, one by one, the fleet commanders nodded. They understood. Humans had a saying from their ancient history. Evil triumphs when good people do nothing. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were not the kind of people who did nothing. Understood, Admiral. We'll be ready. Yuna closed the channel and looked at Jiwon. Send a message to the Third Fleet personnel. Tell them to prepare for combat operations. Tell them we're going to get those people out. Should I inform the Galactic Council of our intentions? Yuna thought about it. Send them a notification after we jump to FTL. By the time they read it, we'll already be there. 6 hours later, the Third Fleet powered up its engines. 200 ships moving as one. Their hulls painted with the blue and white of United Earth. Inside those ships, 20,000 men and women checked their weapons, reviewed their orders, and prepared to do what humans had always done best: protect those who couldn't protect themselves. They didn't send aid ships filled with supplies. They didn't send diplomats with treaties. They didn't send observers with cameras. The Velnar had asked for help, and the Deathworlders were giving them exactly what they needed. They sent a fleet, and somewhere in the dark between stars, the Krathul swarm was about to learn why you should never make humans angry, especially when you hurt the innocent. Part 2. The Gravity of War. The Krathul Warlord. Vakris stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as his warriors loaded the last group of Velnar civilians onto the transport ships. Everything was going according to plan. The weak herbivore species had barely resisted. A few had tried to hide, but Krathul hunters were experts at finding prey. In 3 days, they had rounded up nearly all 300,000 of them. Another profitable raid, his second-in-command said, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. The slave markets will pay well for these. They're docile and intelligent enough for basic labor. Vakris nodded. The Velnar were perfect slaves. Too weak to fight back, too peaceful to cause trouble, and too numerous to be valuable enough that anyone would waste resources rescuing them. The Galactic Council would debate and complain, but they never actually did anything. The galaxy belonged to the strong, and the Krathul were very strong. His sensor officer suddenly made a sharp sound. "Warlord, we have multiple contacts dropping out of FTL at the system's edge." "How many?" The officer checked his screens, then checked again. 200 ships, Warlord, unknown configuration. They're broadcasting Terran identification codes. Vakris had never heard of Terrans. What sector are they from? accessing database. They call themselves humans. They're from a Class 12 death world called Earth. Warlord, the database has them flagged with a warning. It says their planet has gravity twice the galactic standard, and they evolved as persistence hunters and— I don't care what the database says, Vakris interrupted. They sent 200 ships against my 70. They're either fools or they're here to negotiate. Either way, we have 300,000 hostages. They won't risk attacking. But even as he said it, Vakris felt something he hadn't felt in many years. A small thread of doubt. Why would anyone send a fleet this large if they weren't planning to fight? On the bridge of the Hammer of Sol, Commander Jiho studied the enemy formation. The Krathul ships were big and intimidating, built to scare rather than fight. Their weapons were designed to disable ships, not destroy them. After all, you couldn't steal cargo from wreckage. Their shields were adequate but not impressive. They moved slowly, probably because they rarely needed to chase anyone. They're confident, Lieutenant Hana said from her station. She was the fleet's expert on alien psychology. Look at their formation. They're not even preparing defensive positions. They think we're here to talk. Jiho allowed himself a cold smile. Let's see how long that lasts. Status of the fleet? All ships report ready for combat. Weapons charged. Marines are in drop pods ready for deployment. We're waiting on Admiral Yuna's order. The order came moments later. Admiral Yuna's voice was calm and clear across the fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral Yuna to all Third Fleet vessels. Our mission is simple. Free the Velnar civilians. Eliminate the Krathul military presence. Show the galaxy what happens when you target the innocent. Transmit our terms to the enemy flagship. Jiho nodded to his communications officer. The message went out on all frequencies in Galactic Common, so there could be no misunderstanding. Attention Krathul forces. This is the United Earth Third Fleet. You are in violation of Galactic Convention 147 regarding the treatment of civilian populations. You have one opportunity to surrender. Release all Velnar civilians immediately and depart this system. You have 10 minutes to comply. This is your only warning. On the Krathul flagship, the message caused confusion and then amusement. Vakris actually laughed. These humans thought 70 ships full of warriors would surrender to them? Impossible. He opened a channel to respond. Unknown human fleet, you are interfering in Krathul operations. We claim this colony by right of conquest. You will withdraw immediately or we will add your crews to our slave pens. We have 300,000 Velnar hostages. Any attack on our forces will result in their immediate execution. You have 10 minutes to begin your retreat. The response from Admiral Yuna came back in less than 5 seconds. Negative. You don't understand the situation. This is not a negotiation. This is a courtesy. You have 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Vakris felt anger replace his amusement. These humans dared to threaten him? He would teach them respect. He ordered his weapons officers to target several transport ships filled with Velnar civilians. If the humans wanted to play games, he would show them the cost. Human fleet, we are prepared to destroy our cargo if you do not. His threat was cut off as every alarm on his bridge started screaming at once. His sensor officer was shouting something about incoming fire, about weapon signatures he had never seen before, about energy readings that made no sense. The human fleet had opened fire at maximum range, farther than any species normally engaged in combat. Their weapons were different. Railguns that fired solid projectiles at a fraction of light speed. Plasma cannons that burned hotter than most stars. Missile swarms controlled by artificial intelligence that could think and adapt faster than any organic mind. The first volley hit 12 Krathul ships simultaneously. Shields that were designed to stop normal weapons shattered like glass. Armor meant to resist energy beams melted under the plasma fire. One ship took a railgun round straight through its central hull and simply broke in half. Vakris grabbed his command chair as his own ship rocked from a near miss. Return fire. All ships. Engage the humans. But the Krathul weapons designed to disable and capture were useless against human shields and armor. Their energy disruptors that could shut down most ship systems just made the human vessels flicker slightly before their redundant systems kicked in. Their boarding missiles that were supposed to latch onto hulls and burn through were shot down by human point defense systems that tracked and destroyed hundreds of targets per second. Lieutenant Hana watched the battle from her station and took notes. The Kruthul were fighting like they always did, like they were hunting prey that would panic and scatter. But humans had learned warfare on a planet where everything wanted to kill them. They fought like wolves, coordinated and relentless. 4 minutes into the engagement, 30 Kruthul ships were destroyed or crippled. The human fleet had lost 0 ships and taken only minor damage. Vakris couldn't believe what he was seeing. His ships were dying. His warriors, who had conquered dozens of worlds, were being slaughtered by an enemy that fought with a precision and brutality he had never encountered. These humans moved like they had been born in the void of space, like their ships were extensions of their bodies. "Warlord, we must retreat," his second-in-command screamed. "We cannot win this fight." Vakris wanted to argue, but he knew it was true. "All ships, begin withdrawal sequence. Prepare for FTL jump." On the Hammer of Soul, Jiho saw the Kruthul fleet trying to run. "Admiral, the enemy is attempting to flee." "Did we give them permission to leave?" Yuna's voice asked calmly. "No, Admiral." "Then don't let them. Destroy any ship that tries to jump to FTL. The only Kruthul leaving this system are the ones we allow to leave in escape pods after they surrender." The human fleet shifted formation. Fast attack corvettes moved to intercept the fleeing Kruthul ships. Every time a Kruthul vessel powered up its FTL drive, human railguns put a round through the engine section. Missiles found their targets with perfect accuracy. The Kruthul were trapped. At the 8-minute mark, 55 Kruthul ships were disabled or destroyed. The survivors were scattered, their formation broken, their warlord's flagship burning from multiple hits. Vakris made his decision. Pride was worth nothing if you were dead. "This is Warlord Vakris to the human fleet. We surrender. We surrender. Cease fire." The human weapons stopped firing. The sudden silence was almost worse than the battle. Vakris transmitted his surrender codes and waited. His ship was dying around him, life support failing, fires spreading through the lower decks. Admiral Yuna's voice came over his speakers. "All Kruthul personnel will evacuate to escape pods immediately. You will leave behind all weapons, all armor, and all Velnar civilians. You will proceed to the designated coordinates where you will be taken into custody. Any ship that deviates from these instructions will be destroyed. You have 15 minutes. Vakris had no choice. He gave the orders. Across the Kruthul fleet, warriors abandoned their ships, leaving behind their weapons and their captives. They climbed into escape pods, defeated and humiliated. The battle was over in 9 minutes and 40 seconds. The Third Fleet had not lost a single ship. The Kruthul had lost everything. On the surface of Thesia Prime's moon, the Velnar who had been hiding in the ruins watched as human drop pods began to fall from the sky like metal rain. They had called for help and wondered if anyone would come. Now they had their answer. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they had come to set things right. Part 3. Boots on the Ground. The drop pod screamed through the atmosphere, shaking so hard that Captain Taiho's teeth rattled in his skull. He had done this 100 times before, but it never got comfortable. Around him, his squad of Marines sat strapped in their harnesses, weapons locked to their armor, faces hidden behind helmets. They were the 7th Orbital Assault Division, the best of the best, and they had one simple job today: get every single Velnar civilian out alive. The pod hit the ground with a crash that would have killed most species. The impact force was 12 times Earth's gravity for half a second. The Marines barely noticed. They had trained in worse. The doors blew outward and Taiho was moving before the smoke cleared, his rifle up and ready. The primary detention facility was a large building that the Kruthul had converted into a prison. Velnar civilians were packed inside, thousands of them, guarded by Kruthul warriors who were now trapped on the surface. The Kruthul had heard their fleet was destroyed. Some wanted to surrender. Others wanted to fight. Taiho didn't care which. He had his orders. "Bravo team, take the east entrance. Charlie team, west side. Alpha team with me, straight through the front door," Taiho said into his radio. His HUD showed him the positions of all his Marines. all the civilians inside, and all the enemy contacts. Human technology was very good at finding targets. Sergeant Soman led Charlie team around the side of the building. She was shorter than most Marines, but twice as mean. Her squad moved fast and quiet, using buildings for cover. Through her helmet display, she could see the heat signatures of Krathel guards on the roof. 3 targets. Rooftop position. Permission to engage? Granted, Taiho replied. Make it clean. Soman's sniper, a tall, quiet woman named Isil, set up her rifle and took exactly 3 seconds to acquire all 3 targets. 3 shots? So fast they sounded like one. 3 Krathel guards fell before they knew they were under attack. The humans moved like ghosts. At the front entrance, 23 Krathel warriors had formed a defensive line. They wore their combat armor and carried energy weapons designed to cause maximum pain. They thought their size and strength would be enough. They had never fought humans before. Taiho walked toward them with his squad, not hurrying, not hiding. The Krathul commander shouted something in their language, probably a demand to surrender. Sorry, don't speak the language, Taiho said, but I've got a message for you anyway. Let the Velnar go and you live. Fight us and you die. Your choice. The Krathul chose to fight. They opened fire with their neural disruptors, weapons that sent waves of pain through nervous systems. The humans stumbled slightly as the invisible energy hit them. Then they kept walking. Their armor helped, but mostly it was just human biology. Pain tolerance bred from a million years of surviving injuries that would kill softer species. Well, that tickled, one Marine said. Our turn now. The firefight lasted exactly 90 seconds. The humans moved with perfect coordination, using cover, suppressing fire, and flanking maneuvers. The Krathul were strong and tough, but they fought like individuals. Humans fought like a pack of wolves, each one supporting the others. When it was over, all 23 Krathul were down. The humans had taken some hits. One Marine, Corporal Doyen, had a plasma burn on his shoulder that had melted through his armor. He cursed in Korean, sprayed combat gel on the wound, and kept moving. His armor's medical systems injected him with painkillers and antibiotics. He would get it treated properly later. Right now, there were civilians to save. Inside the facility, the Velnar huddled together in terror. They had heard the fighting outside. Now the doors burst open and strange creatures in armor walked in. The Velnar had never seen humans before. These beings were shorter than Krathul but moved with a smooth confidence that was somehow more frightening than size. Taiho removed his helmet so they could see his face. It was a calculated risk, but fear was their enemy right now as much as the Krathul were. We're here to help, he said in Galactic Common, speaking slowly and clearly. We're humans from Earth. We received your distress call. We're going to get you out of here. A young Velnar female, barely more than a child, stepped forward. You came? We called and you came? Of course we came, Taiho said. That's what the message meant. You asked for help. Medical Officer Yunji pushed past the combat troops and started setting up her triage station. She was small even by human standards, barely over 1.5 meters tall, but she moved with absolute authority. Her medkit unfolded into a portable surgery unit. She started examining the Velnar, checking for injuries, malnutrition, and disease. This one needs immediate hydration, she called out. That one has a broken bone that's set wrong. Get me the portable scanner. I need to check this child for internal injuries. The Velnar watched in amazement as this tiny human female worked without fear in the middle of a war zone. Explosions still sounded in the distance as other Marine units cleared the area. Yunji didn't even flinch. She just kept working, her hands steady and sure. Are you not afraid? One Velnar elder asked her. Yunji looked up briefly. Afraid of what? The Krathul? My friends outside will handle them. I've got patients to treat. That's my job. Across the city, the human Marines swept through 17 different detention facilities. The Krathul tried to mount a defense at the 4th one. They attempted to use Velnar civilians as hostages, dragging them out and threatening to execute them if the humans didn't retreat. Staff Sergeant Kyungmin, a sniper with the call sign Ghost, watched through her scope from 800 meters away. The Krathul was holding a Velnar child, a weapon pointed at the small alien's head. The Krathul's armor had a weak point at the neck, just a 3-centimeter gap where the helmet met the chest plate. "I have the shot," Kyungmin said calmly. "Waiting for authorization." "Will the hostage be safe?" her spotter asked. "I don't miss." "Take it." Kyungmin exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The round traveled 800 meters in under a second. It went through the 3-centimeter gap in the Krathul's armor, through its neck, and exited out the other side. The Krathul dropped instantly. The Velnar child was untouched. "Target down. Hostage is secure." The Krathul tried the hostage tactic 2 more times. Both times, human snipers ended the situation with shots so precise they seemed impossible. The Krathul finally realized that these Deathworlders could shoot the wings off a flying insect at a kilometer. Taking hostages was suicide. By the time the local sun started to rise, every detention facility was secured. Every Velnar civilian was free. The Krathul ground forces that had come to conquer were either dead or in custody, stripped of their armor and weapons, sitting in their own prison camps under human guard. Captain Taiho stood on a hill overlooking the main city. His armor was scorched and dented. His shoulder hurt where he had taken a direct hit from an energy weapon, and he was tired. But behind him, 300,000 Velnar were alive and safe. Medical teams were treating the injured. Supply drops were bringing in food and clean water. The civilians who had been starving under Krathul occupation were eating their first real meal in days. Quillix, the communications officer who had sent the original distress call, approached Taiho nervously. He had survived the initial attack by hiding in the wreckage of his building. He looked at the human, this warrior from a death world, and tried to find the words. "You came," Quillix said, his voice shaking. "We sent the call and you came. Why? We're not part of your species. We have nothing to offer you. Why did you risk your lives for us?" Taiho looked at the small alien. "Because you asked for help," he said simply. "Because you needed it. Because the right thing to do doesn't need a reason beyond that." The Galactic Council did nothing. They debated while we died. But you came with a fleet. You fought for us. I don't understand. Taiho put a hand on Quillix's shoulder, gentle despite the armored glove. "Maybe that's the difference between us and them. We understand that evil wins when good people do nothing. You called for help. We answered. That's all there is to it." In orbit above them, the Third Fleet maintained position. The captured Krathul were being processed. Their ships were being examined for evidence. And a message was being prepared for the Galactic Council, one that would change everything. The Velnar had called for help. The Deathworlders had answered. And the galaxy was about to learn that humanity's mercy was matched only by its capacity for violence when defending those who could not defend themselves. The battle for Thessia Prime was over, but the war for the galaxy's soul had just begun. Part 4. The Price of Predation. The Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives from 200 species filled the curved seating areas, their voices creating a noise like 1,000 different animals, all talking at once. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Hyunwoo, the human representative, looking calm and unmoved by the storm of criticism being directed at him. "This is an outrage," shouted Council Member Vixnar, a Pelthian whose skin changed colors with emotion. Right now, he was bright red with anger. Humanity had no authority to launch a military operation in the Thessia system. The proper procedure is to submit a proposal for council review, then form an investigation committee, then wait while 300,000 people die, Hyunwoo interrupted, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "Is that the proper procedure? Let me check my notes." "Yes, that seems to be exactly what happened." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several representatives demanded Hyunwoo be removed. Others called for sanctions against humanity. A few, very quietly, said nothing at all. Council Chair Telvax, an ancient being who had led the council for 60 years, raised one of his many appendages for silence. The noise gradually died down. "Ambassador Hyunwoo," Telvax said in his slow, careful voice, "the council acknowledges that the Velnar civilians were in danger. However, your species' response was excessive. 70 Krathul ships destroyed or disabled. Approximately 4,000 Krathul casualties. This level of violence is unprecedented. You're right, Hyunwoo said. It is unprecedented. You know what else is unprecedented? Actually saving people instead of forming committees to discuss saving people. Before Telvax could respond, there was a commotion at the entrance to the chamber. The Velnar delegation was arriving, led by Quillix himself. The small aliens looked tiny in the massive council chamber, but they walked with purpose. Quillix approached the speaker's platform. His voice was quiet, but the chamber's amplification system carried it to every corner. Honored council members, Quillix began. I am here representing all 300,000 Velnar survivors of the Thessia incident. We have prepared a formal petition. He held up a data tablet. This petition is signed by every adult survivor. We formally request that the Galactic Council grant humanity full partnership status in Velnar defensive operations. We request that human military forces be allowed to maintain a presence in our space. We request this because they saved us when no one else would. Vixnar stood up. This is highly irregular. The Velnar delegation should not what? Quillix's voice suddenly had an edge to it that surprised everyone. The timid communications officer who had sent that desperate distress call was gone. In his place was someone who had seen his people dragged into slavery while the council debated. Should not interrupt? Should not make demands? Should we sit quietly while you tell us that our rescue was improper? Where were your ships, Council Member Vixnar? Where was the Pelthian Commonwealth when we were screaming for help? The silence that followed was heavy. Hyunwoo stepped forward. The council says our response was excessive. Let me show you what we responded to. He activated a holographic display. Audio files began to play. They were recordings recovered from the Krathel ships, conversations between the raiders. The council heard Krathel voices discussing which Velnar would make good breeding stock, which ones should be worked to death in the mines, which children should be sold to which markets. The chamber fell completely silent. Some representatives looked away, others stared at their desks. The horror in those recordings was undeniable. Then Hyunwoo played video footage. Velnar children in cages, families being separated, the elderly being dragged from their homes. He played it all, unflinching, making the council watch what they had allowed to happen through their inaction. This is what you call an excessive response, Hyunwoo said quietly. We responded to this. While you were forming assessment committees, people were dying. While you were debating jurisdictions, children were being sold into slavery. So yes, we destroyed 70 Krathel ships. We eliminated their military presence. We made absolutely certain they could never hurt anyone again, and I will not apologize for that. Commander Ji-won, head of naval intelligence, stepped forward. She was younger than Hyunwoo, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been analyzing data from the Krathel ships for the past week. Council members, we found something interesting in the Krathel data cores, Ji-won said. They had intelligence reports on the Thessia colony. Very detailed reports. Information about defense capabilities, response times, council procedures. Information they shouldn't have had. She pulled up documents on the holographic display. Someone provided the Krathul with council intelligence assessments. Someone told them exactly how long it would take for help to arrive. Someone essentially gave them permission to attack a defenseless colony. The chamber erupted again. Representatives were shouting, demanding to know who was responsible. Ji-won waited for the noise to die down. We're still investigating the source of the leak, but what's clear is that the Krathul knew the council's response would be slow. They planned their attack around your procedures. They weaponized your bureaucracy against the Velnar. Telvax looked older than his many years. This is deeply troubling. An investigation will be launched immediately. An investigation, Hyunwoo repeated. Another committee. More debates. While you investigate, what happens to the next species that calls for help? What happens to the next colony that gets attacked because raiders know you move slowly? What would you have us do? Vixnar demanded. Abandon all our procedures? Let every species with warships do whatever they want? No, Hyunwoo said. I would have you remember what you're supposed to be. You're called the Galactic Council. Your job is to protect the galaxy's people, not to protect procedures, not to protect political relationships. People. He pulled out a data chip and placed it on the speaker's platform. This contains the draft of what we're calling the Thesia Accords, new protocols for responding to distress calls. Any civilian emergency gets immediate response, not committee review. Species with rapid response capabilities get authorization to act first and report later. And most importantly, there are penalties for deliberate delays that result in civilian casualties. This would fundamentally change how the Council operates, Telvac said. Yes, it would, Hyunwoo agreed. It would make you effective. Right now, you're not protecting anyone. You're just existing. Over the next 3 days, the Council debated the Thesia Accords. During those debates, 7 species formally requested mutual defense treaties with humanity. 12 more submitted informal inquiries. The Krathel swarm, upon learning that humans had declared them an active threat to galactic peace, abandoned 12 occupied worlds and fled back to their home systems. The galaxy was learning that the Deathworlders from Earth didn't just have powerful weapons. They had something more dangerous, the will to use those weapons to protect others. And they had the terrifying combination of technology and determination that made them unstoppable when they decided something needed to be done. On the 6th day of debates, the Council voted. The Thesia Accords passed by a narrow margin. Not everyone was happy about it. Some species thought humanity had too much power now. Others worried about what would happen when the next crisis came. But in the Velnar colonies, in the rescued settlements, and in 100 other worlds where people had thought no one would help them, something changed. Hope. The kind of hope that comes from knowing someone is watching, someone who won't debate while you die, someone who will send a fleet. Ambassador Hyunwoo stood in his quarters that night, looking at the stars through the viewport. Behind him, Jiwon was reviewing the intelligence reports on other potential threats in the galaxy. There were many. Too many. Do you think we did the right thing? Jiwon asked. Hyunwoo was quiet for a moment. I think we did the only thing. The Velnar asked for help. We gave it. Everything else is just politics. The galaxy is going to expect us to do this again. Every time there's a crisis, they'll look to us. I know. We can't save everyone. No, Hyunwoo agreed. But we can try. And we can make damn sure that anyone who hurts innocent people knows there will be consequences. Real consequences. Not just strongly worded letters and economic sanctions. Jiwon nodded. She understood. The humans had drawn a line. Cross it, and the Deathworlders would come for you. Not with diplomats. Not with committees. With fleets and marines and the absolute certainty that evil would be met with overwhelming force. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was the reason why. Part 5. The New Standard. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Thesia Prime, and the galaxy looked different. Not in any way you could see from space, but in the way things worked. In the way people thought. In the way they hoped. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of his new flagship, looking at the view screen showing the vast expanse of space. He was no longer just a captain of a patrol ship. Now he commanded the 5th Fleet, an entire battle group dedicated to rapid response operations. The ship beneath his feet was called the Velnar's Shield, and part of its construction had been funded by the grateful Velnar Confederacy. Admiral, we're receiving a distress signal from the Corvin system, his communications officer reported. Pirates attacking a mining station. Approximately 2,000 civilians. Minho didn't hesitate. Set course. Maximum speed. All ships ready for combat. The 5th Fleet moved as one, 50 warships accelerating to jump speed. They would arrive at the Corvin system in 3 hours. The pirates would be gone or captured within 30 minutes of arrival. This was the new standard. This was what happened now when someone called for help in the protected zone. That's what they called it now. The protected zone. 17 species had signed mutual defense pacts with humanity. Their borders formed a region of space where pirates, slavers, and raiders no longer operated. The last 3 groups that had tested whether humans were serious had sent their own distress calls. No one had answered. The message was clear. Hurt the innocent, and the Deathworlders would come for you. The UES Indomitable, Minho's old ship, now patrolled the border regions. Its new captain was a young officer who took his job seriously. The ship that had first received the Velnar distress call was now a symbol. Every raider and pirate in the galaxy knew that ship's name. Seeing it on their sensors was enough to make most of them flee. On the Velnar moon, now officially renamed Liberation, Colonel Tejo watched as Velnar recruits practiced emergency procedures. They weren't training to be warriors. That wasn't in their nature. But they were learning to be coordinators, intelligence analysts, and support personnel for human rapid response teams. A young Velnar named Nixal approached Tejo nervously. Nixal had been one of the children rescued from the Krathel detention facilities. Now he was 20 cycles old and wanted to help. "Colonel, I finished the analysis you requested," Nixal said, handing over a datapad. "I've identified 3 systems that match the profile for potential Krathel raids. All of them have weak defenses and slow council response times." Tejo reviewed the information. Nixal was good at this work. He could see patterns, predict behaviors. "Excellent work. I'll forward this to Fleet Intelligence. They'll position assets to respond if anything happens." "Thank you, Colonel. I want to make sure no one else goes through what we did. No other children should have to hide while their parents are taken away." Tejo put a hand on the young Velnar's shoulder. "That's why we're here. That's why we're training your people. So next time, you won't need to wait for someone to save you. You'll be part of the network that saves others." In the medical center, Director Yunji was training Velnar doctors in combat medicine. The Velnar were natural healers, gentle and patient. But they had never worked in war zones before. Yunji was teaching them how to prioritize injuries, how to work under fire, how to save lives when everything around you is chaos. "Remember," Yunji explained to her students, "in combat medicine, the goal isn't perfection. It's keeping people alive long enough to get them to a hospital. Quick, effective, efficient. We'll make them perfect later." A Velnar medical student named Cyrix raised her hand. "But what if we're afraid? What if the fighting is too close?" Yunji smiled. "Then you remember why you're there. You're there because someone is hurt and needs help. Fear is normal. Fear is healthy. But you don't let it stop you from doing your job. Trust in the soldiers protecting you. They're very good at their job." Across the galaxy, on the Galactic Council Station, Ambassador Hyunwoo was in a meeting with representatives from the Minara Coalition, a group of 6 small species who wanted to join the protected zone. They were nervous, unsure if they could trust humanity's promises. "We've heard stories," the Minara representative said. Her name was Palara, and she looked like a cross between a bird and a lizard. "Stories that humans are dangerous, that your world is a nightmare of predators and violence. How do we know you won't turn on us?" Hyunwoo had heard this question many times. "You're right. Earth is dangerous. It made us dangerous too. We evolved to hunt, to fight, to survive things that would kill most species. But here's what you need to understand. We chose to use that strength to protect others. We could have become conquerors. We could have used our weapons to dominate, but we didn't. When we heard the Velnar crying for help, we didn't see weak prey. We saw people who needed protection. But what do you get from this? There must be something you want." "We want a galaxy where people can live without fear," Hyunwoo said simply. "We want children to grow up safely. We want traders to travel without worrying about pirates. We want species to develop and prosper without being enslaved. That's what we get. A better galaxy." Palara was quiet for a long moment. "The council would have let my people die, wouldn't they? If someone attacked us, they would debate and discuss while we burned." "I can't speak for the council," Hyunwoo said carefully. "But I can tell you this. If you join the protected zone and someone attacks you, we won't debate. We'll send the fleet." The Minara Coalition signed the treaty 3 days later. In her office at Terra Nova Station, Commander Ji-won reviewed intelligence reports with a growing sense of concern. The Krathul swarm wasn't the only threat out there. Her analyst had identified 6 different raider groups, 3 slaver organizations, and 2 species that seemed to be gearing up for territorial expansion. But there was something else, something bigger. Deep space monitoring stations had detected unusual ship movements in the galactic core regions. Large fleets assembling, Weapons testing. The signatures didn't match any known species. Jiwon sent her report to Admiral Yuna. The old admiral read it with her usual calm expression, but Jiwon could see the concern in her eyes. "How certain are you about these readings?" Yuna asked. 70% certain. Something is happening out there. Something big. We don't know who or what yet, but they're preparing for war. Then we need to be ready, Yuna said. Increase patrol frequencies in the outer zones. Start building the 6th and 7th fleets. And get me a meeting with the council. If there's a major threat coming, they need to know. But even as she gave those orders, Yuna knew the truth. When the next crisis came, when the next threat emerged, the galaxy would look to humanity. Not because humans were perfect, not because they had all the answers, but because they had proven they would act. They would fight. They would protect those who couldn't protect themselves. On Earth, in the city of Seoul, a monument was being built. It was a memorial to the Third Fleet's action at Thessia Prime. The names of every Marine who had fought in the liberation were carved into black stone. At the center was a statue showing a human soldier helping a Velnar child to safety. At the dedication ceremony, Quillick stood before the crowd and spoke. His voice no longer shook. He had found strength in the aftermath of terror. When we sent our distress call, Quillick said, we didn't know if anyone would hear. We didn't know if anyone would care. We were a small species in a big galaxy, and we were dying. But the humans heard us. They cared. They came with a fleet and they saved us. All of us. Every single one. He paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. Humans and Velnar together, along with representatives from a dozen other species. The galaxy is safer now, because of what happened at Thessia Prime. Not just because the Krathul were defeated, but because everyone learned a lesson. Evil only wins when good people do nothing. The humans taught us that doing something, taking action, protecting the innocent, these things matter more than procedures and politics. In the audience, Sergeant Soman stood in her dress uniform, medals on her chest. Beside her were the other Marines who had fought in the liberation. They listened to Quillick's speech with quiet pride. They had done their job. They had saved people. That was enough. Lieutenant Hana had become the director of the Terran Cultural Exchange Program. She traveled from world to world, teaching other species about cooperation, about mutual defense, about how to build networks of protection rather than hoping the council would save them. Her message was simple. Strength isn't wrong. Using strength to hurt others is wrong. Using strength to protect others is the highest calling. The galaxy was learning. Slowly, sometimes painfully, but learning. Pirates found fewer targets. Slavers found their ships destroyed before they could capture anyone. Raiders discovered that the protected zone lived up to its name. And in the dark spaces between stars, on patrol ships and battle stations, human crews kept watch. They monitored distress frequencies. They tracked ship movements. They stood ready. Because somewhere in the galaxy right now, someone might be in trouble. Someone might be calling for help. Someone might be afraid and alone and desperate. And when that call came, the Deathworlders would answer. Not with thoughts and prayers, not with committees and debates. They would answer with fire and steel and the absolute certainty that those who harm the innocent would face humanity's wrath. The Velnar had sent a distress call asking for aid. They received a fleet. They received liberation. They received a promise. And that promise, carved into human military doctrine and broadcast across the galaxy, was simple. We hear you. We're coming. And we will make things right. The galaxy was different now. The galaxy was safer, and humanity stood watch, ready for whatever came next. The Deathworlders had shown the galaxy what real protection looked like. Not passive defense, not bureaucratic inaction, but active, immediate, overwhelming response to evil. The new standard had been set, and the galaxy would never be the same. In his quarters aboard the Velnar's shield, Admiral Minho received a new distress call. He read it, set down his coffee, and gave the orders. The Fifth Fleet moved out, racing toward people who needed help. Because that's what they did now. That's what they would always do. They heard the call, they answered with fleets, and they made damn sure that in this galaxy, evil had consequences. The end of the beginning.